Yep, any questions? I've also got a website there. Why I pass all this information on, I've had people say to me, friends and that, say, why do you tell everybody what you do? Why do you explain it to them? I said, well, there's two reasons. One, I had a very good friend about 20 years ago, he's no longer with us. He stood up at a Federation function once and he said, what a shame it's been that there's been so many good flyers come through our Federation, and when they've passed on, they've taken all that information with them. They wouldn't share it. And that really struck a chord with me, and I thought, I'm not going to be one of those. I'll pass on with it. I'll pass on whatever I've learned from it. And what I do doesn't necessarily mean that's going to work for you. Because I've gathered my system and everything that I do over 38 years of listening to what other people tell me and sorting that out and developing it into my system. And the second reason I tell them that I don't mind telling this everything is just because you know what I do doesn't mean you can do it. That's the thing, that's the hard part. Pigeon racing is simple, but at the same time it's difficult. The more changes you make to your routine, the more changes you make to your lofts, the more variation you'll get in your performances. You have to be consistent in everything you do. Human beings like me, if you fed me steak for breakfast, lunch and dinner, within 2 days I couldn't eat another piece of steak. But pigeons, they want the same food all the time. Now it doesn't mean, like with my system there, it changes each day, it changes during the month. But they're gradual changes, they're gradually changing little things in it to bring it up to it. And because it's repeated over and over again, seasonally, like my system is based on seasons, not the weather season, they're based on the breeding season, the molting resting season, and then the racing season. And it's consistent all the way through, all the time. I make little variations in the amount of feed and the type of feed I feed them, because we fly 3 different routes. 2 of our routes are over the Great Divide, and we usually get westerly winds, and they're fast races, they come in high. The other route is off the north, which is what I prefer, and a lot of others do too. We get harder racing, velocities around 1,000, 1,100 type feet, which is good racing. So every year is different. You have to change things around a little bit to it, but I still stay very consistent in what I do. And once I get them right, I know I can keep them right. So any questions?
Okay.
Hang on. Just want to ask one question. It's very important. When you separate your birds with a tennis racket, do you use backhand or forehand?
It is a good question, actually. I've become quite proficient at it. Originally I wasn't, but I do, and I do use a proper tennis. I've actually got 2 tennis rackets. I've got, well, one's a squash racket. I got that on a long piece of conduit, probably about that high. And with those young pigeons, that's another thing I didn't mention, but I always walk behind them when they're young and I tap them to get them in. So they know me, they're used to me doing that, so on race days if I come behind them with that, they just run straight in. But the tennis racket thing, yeah, I used to have a stick and no matter what I did, you couldn't get it. But if you get the tennis racket, you can put it right behind them and you can just make them do whatever you want.
I thought it was a good opportunity.
Yeah. And I sometimes do that. If one tries to fly back, I will hit it with my hand, so...
Now, Gardy's come a long way to ask you a question. He's driven 10 or 12 hours. It must be a bloody good question.
No, it's not that important. With the tapering feed system, Len, from building up towards the end of the week, do you believe that can work if you train it all during the week, or is it purely like you train on the Saturday and race on a Saturday? If people couldn't, say, train their pigeons on a Saturday and train them on a Tuesday, can it work, that system, do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question. Once upon a time I used to take the pigeons for a midweek toss. I haven't done that now for probably 10, 15 years. I found that the pigeons were much, much better if I kept them on their routine, if I didn't toss them during the week. Excuse me, and I just did that one Saturday thing. But yeah, there are variations you're going to have to work out for yourself. Like at pigeon racing, you have to make it suit your lifestyle. You know, what your work commitments are, your family commitments are, what size your flocks are, you know, whatever you can do. But the problem we've got now, and you'll have it down here, we've got a lot of traffic now. I think they said there's something like 2,000 people a month moving to Queensland, and Brisbane in particular, and the roads are just getting clogged. So trying to go tossing, well, once upon a time we used to go late afternoon tossing, and that can be a really good thing. If I was having a season where I was getting really good returns but I wasn't getting the performance I want, I'd take them for a late afternoon toss. And what I'd do is I'd drive down to a location where there was a lot of pigeon flies, and they'd have their birds all out flying, and I'd wait till all their birds were up, whatever it was, 4 o'clock, 4:30, and I'd let mine out with them. And you know, pigeons are gregarious, they want to get together, so they all join in. So those pigeons of mine are flying around with those flocks down there, and they're probably about 30 k's from home. And they're waiting for these other pigeons to break and go with them. But obviously those other pigeons are not going to break. And it's getting later and later and later, and those pigeons start dropping down. And now my pigeons are faced with a dilemma. Do they go down there for the night, or do they go like hell to get back home before it gets dark? And I tell you, if you don't drink, you will start drinking if you do that. If you're sitting there and it's starting to get dark and you haven't got any pigeons home from that toss, and you're thinking, have I blown them away? Have I done the wrong thing? And then they come home and they are going like a bat out of hell to hit that loft. You might be missing a couple, and you probably get some back the next day. As a matter of fact, one time I did that because I was getting terrific returns and I just couldn't get the results. I did that, and one pigeon didn't come home till the next morning, and the next morning was basketing day. So I did that on the Wednesday prior to basketing day. I put that pigeon in, and I clocked that pigeon on the Saturday, and I ran 9th in the fair. And to me, this is that lesson thing I was saying with pigeons, and they're not getting all that intelligent as far as reasoning is concerned. They don't reason like humans do. Everything they do, like I said, is based on instinct or previous experience. Now that pigeon had that experience of staying out overnight and didn't like it. When it went to that race and all those other pigeons come out, all it was thinking about is, I'm going to get home, I'm not going to go through that again. And they'll do that. But the interesting thing is they'll only do that week. Within a week, they can forget about that. So that type of thing I used to do, but no, I don't do that anymore, because I found I couldn't do that build-up properly when I was doing that type of thing, so I don't toss during the week anymore. And the traffic, of course.
Who's next?
Yeah,
Sorry.
Len, you mentioned about the feeding. What's your thoughts on hamper day? How much do you feed them, and how much do you send them away with to the race?
As much as they can eat, or not as much as they can eat, as much as they want. That's what I was saying before. If I build them up right, they don't eat a lot. I'll put my pigeons into a race, and their crop, well, you can just feel there might be a little bit of feeding. It's certainly not bulging, not sticking out anywhere. There's very little in there. I've seen some people put their pigeons through, and their crop's like a tennis ball. And I think that's so wrong. If you've left your pigeons that late that they're going to pack that crop full, then you haven't built them up towards the end of the week. So when my pigeons go away, I put that feed down and I'll leave it there for 10-15 minutes. They can eat as much as they want. But they walk away and there's still feed left there. They've had a drink, they've gone up on the perch because they're satisfied. Their body's blowing up, they've got all the energy that they want, they don't feel the need to eat. That crop of theirs, their stomach's full, they feel satisfied, so they don't feel the need to fill that crop. So that's why I have them on the day. And that's how I know when I've got it right, is when they don't eat a hell of a lot on that basketing day. If they eat a hell of a lot, I think, oh, I didn't get it right.
Right, next. Here we go.
I noticed you used Coupex to remove lice in your pigeons. I wondered, did you actually spray that around the loft, or do you dip the pigeons physically, or how do you use it?
I used to physically go around and dip them, but it's a hell of a lot of work, and Coupex, like everything else, is not all that good for people. Like in the old days, we used to use that Malawash. Well, that kills brain cells, and I think that's probably why a lot of pigeon fanciers aren't all that smart. Because we used to use a hell of a lot of that Malawash, so we stopped using that and used Coupex, and that's a hell of a lot better. But to really do it, I used to put big bloody gloves on, but then trying to catch your pigeons with big gloves on and wet, you take feathers out of them, you mess them all up. I used to get a mate to come and help me, that was good, but then you've got to get him to line up with you. So now, I just spray the loft out with the pigeons in. I take the feed and the water and everything out and all the pigeons in it. I just get a mist spray and I go in there and I spray the perches, I spray the birds, I chase them around wherever they go, and that gets rid of the pigeon flies. But I only use Coupex for pigeon flies because I use Epronex and Equest Plus for the other.
Next. Over the back here.
Just two sort of quick ones. First of all, how many race birds do you keep? And you also mentioned that you race different lines. So do you have specific birds for specific lines, or do they interchange?
Well, I buy 100 rings. I usually breed around 100 youngsters. By the time you get rid of a few, you don't. And sometimes I go a little bit over, and I usually keep maybe 20 or 30 old birds, something like that. So I probably end up with about 130. Like once upon a time, I used to keep 80. I used to have 80 pigeons. And to maintain a family of pigeons, you have to be keeping more than you want. I've got a saying I've said to people for years, and that is, we've all got too many pigeons, but none of us have got too many good pigeons. And the trouble is you have to keep a lot of pigeons in a family to try and find out where the next good ones are. And so you keep breeding more and more and more, and you end up with more youngsters, and that seems to be the trend today. But so I've probably got about 130. So what was the other part?
The one was about you race different lines, so do you have specific pigeons for each line, or do they interchange?
No, I don't.
Obviously race 2 lines here as well, so
Yeah.
it's a good question for everyone.
Yeah, no I don't. I have the one line all based around that family I was saying. I want a family of pigeons, and these family are a family of pigeons that will go from the first race to the last race as far as on the day pigeons are concerned. They're a family of on the day pigeons. They'll fly any distance as long as they can get home on the day. I won 2018, I won Mackay Fed, which is 510 miles, 820 k's. I clocked that pigeon in, well, it was actually on my birthday, and I had the grandkids over, and then they left, and I sat in the backyard. Well, they were still there, sorry, and I was sitting in the backyard, and I seen this pigeon come at about 5:20. So that was about 11 hours on the wing, and it won the Fed. It was 8 minutes in front of the next bird in the Fed. So that's the type of race they'll do, provided they could get home on the day. If that 500 miler was 10 o'clock the next day, they wouldn't have done it. I'm not a second day flyer. I keep some pigeons to try and do that. People tell me it's the pigeon, not the training, that you need for the next race, but the next day. But a mate of mine who is a good long distance flyer, he gave me this lovely hen. He said, this one will fly the good distance for you, this will win it for you. I won a 600 kilometre Fed with it. I turned it into a sprint bird. So, well, not a sprint bird, but a day bird. He said that can't win a 600 kilometre Fed, but it did, doing 1,400 metres a minute. So it could be the way I train them, I'm not sure. But they any direction, any velocity, as long as it's on the day.
Okay, next, is there another, or?
Yeah.
Okay, down here, Alan Agar.
I didn't see peanuts on your.
Yeah, I don't.
I was asking you about peanuts.
I don't feed peanuts, no.
No?
Sorry.
Well, you're allowed to, Gardy, you come a long way.
That's all right. I just, with the oil mix, there was one in the middle, you said special oil.
Yeah. I mentioned that. That was the
Castrol.
the garlic oil.
So that's your mixture that you make yourself.
Yeah, I make that up myself in the red bowl there. Just go back the next slide.
Another one?
Another one.
No, it's garlic.
That's this one here. That's this one here. It's garlic oil plus multivitamins. So I just buy multivitamins for humans at the chemist shop, but I buy capsules that you can pull apart, put them into it. Vitamin E, same thing, capsules you can pull apart. Coenzyme Q10, which has a big effect on the muscles, the way the muscles relax. I put that in there as well, and I give them a bit of that, plus those other oils on there with the mineral mix and the vitamins and the yeast.
What ratio to Q10 do you use?
I'd have to look at my book, because I don't make it up that often, but I think I use 6 capsules of the Q10, coenzyme Q10.
To the full feed?
No, that's mixed into the oil.
Oh,
So that's mixed into the oil, and then I give them a little bit of the oil on the feed. So they're not getting a hell of a lot. No.
Well, thank you very much, Len. It's been eye-opening. We can see you are committed, and obviously you stick to your proven theories, and it's probably the same with all the top flyers around Australia. Greg, would you like to thank our 2 guests for their appearance here tonight?
Yes, I certainly would, Ray. Thanks very much, Colin, and to Len. And a big round of applause for Ray Fewings, everybody. I don't know if there's anyone else around that compares as well as Ray, but if there is, show him to me. He does a great job. Gavin Harris, a round of applause for Gavin Harris. Thanks, Gavin. You're always there to help out.
Press the button.
Cheers. Thanks very much.
Press the button.
Press the buttons, yeah, and a lot of other things too. And thanks everyone for coming along. I hope that you picked up 1 or 2 little tips that you might be able to use to make your pigeon racing more successful. Thanks for coming along.
And thanks to SAHPA, and once again spread the word about the convention. Just before I leave you, I'll tell you a true story about tossing pigeons. Len mentioned pigeons getting mixed up with other pigeons. When I first started off with pigeons, toward the end of the year, I read that there was a VHA release at Riverton in South Australia. So I got out of bed one morning about 5 and I hampered half a dozen pigeons and I drove to Riverton, and I thought I'll wait till they release their birds and then I'll let mine go and head home. And ended up going to Riverton, but I couldn't find the VHA release truck. And I thought, well, I must have balls this up. And it's obviously they're tossing from releasing from somewhere else. So I let my 6 birds go. And I reckon 60 seconds after I let the birds go, 5,000 pigeons came up from behind them and they joined in with them. And I thought, well, that's the end of those pigeons. I'll never see them again. And would you believe when I got home, they were in the loft. So it shows how good some pigeons are in sorting themselves out. Good to see you all here tonight. Hope you have a great season. We've got plenty to talk about after tonight. And once again, thanks to our guests.